Now, one of the most exciting moments in recent Star Wars history came at D23 last August when Kathleen Kennedy, the president of Lucasfilm, brought Ewan McGregor on stage, and after years and years of speculation and rumor, we finally had it confirmed that he would indeed be reprising the role of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and that it'd be happening in a Disney Plus series set between the events of episodes 3 and 4, as expected. We also heard Kathleen Kennedy say at the time that we have all the scripts written. But it turns out that wasn't entirely true, and news is now breaking that not only were all the scripts not yet written, but the 2 that were done are now being either retooled or thrown out altogether. Also, what was originally going to be a 6-episode series is being reduced to 4 episodes. And to be absolutely clear, no, the show is not being cancelled or anything like that. At most, it's just being delayed a few months, as filming will be pushed back from late this summer to next January. As for what the problem was, well, apparently Kathleen Kennedy thought the idea for the show was too similar to The Mandalorian, where Obi-Wan was going to lend a protective hand to young Luke and possibly even young Leia. This would have been too much like The Mandalorian, where he takes in Baby Yoda and protects him and so on. Though I don't know why this wasn't realized earlier, why they didn't see the similarities until after The Mandalorian had actually aired. I mean, had Kennedy not read the Kenobi scripts when she boldly declared at D23 that we have the scripts written, or had she read them, or what they had at the time, and it was The Mandalorian she was ignorant about? Or did she just miss the connection or not realize how big of a part of the show Baby Yoda would be until after seeing it? Perhaps, and most likely, she basically lied about them being done just to get fans excited and to let them know this is really happening. Anyway, before getting any further into this, Ewan McGregor himself has weighed in on the topic and given us a bit more insight and said that it's just slid to next year, that's all. The scripts were really good. I think now that episode 9 came out and everyone at Lucasfilm's got more time to spend on the writing, they felt like they wanted more time to spend on the writing. I've read about 80-90% of what they've written so far, and it's really, really good. Instead of shooting this August, they just want to start shooting in January, that's all. Nothing more dramatic than that. It often happens in projects. They just wanted to push it to next year. It will still have the same release date. I don't think it will affect the release date. They're still shooting towards having the film or show release when it was going to be originally. Okay, so if what he says is to be believed, and I'm not accusing him of lying as much as I think he might be a little optimistic, but this delay isn't really that much of a big deal and won't affect the release date. Not that we had a release date in the first place, so they can always just say it's airing precisely when they meant it to. Either way though, it's yet another problem Lucasfilm is having behind the scenes with a project that seems to involve writers and or directors, another one to be added to the rather long list. And sure, in this industry, delays and other problems are not all that uncommon, but it's beginning to feel like Lucasfilm can't get a single project to run smoothly, other than The Mandalorian, which seems to have very little involvement from Kennedy, especially if she doesn't even know what it was really going to be about, and how it would conflict with what they had planned for the Kenobi series. Then when you factor in the diminishing returns at the box office for the sequel trilogy, that The Rise of Skywalker is only going to make around half of what The Force Awakens made, and that it might just barely limp past what Rogue One pulled in, that in 4 short years, Star Wars went from looking like an unstoppable juggernaut with Episode 7 to going out with a whimper with Episode 9, with no clear vision or direction for the future in place, with many in the media saying Star Wars fatigue is the problem, when we fans all know bad to mediocre Star Wars is the real problem, the real cause for its fall from grace and why people stopped caring. It seems to become more and more evident that new leadership is needed at Lucasfilm, that Kathleen Kennedy will be gone after her contract expires next year, that someone with a better understanding of the franchise needs to take the helm already. I mean, forget about The Mandalorian for a moment and take the original idea for the Obi-Wan series she seemed to be okay with, where it was going to be all about Obi-Wan lending a protective hand to Luke and possibly Leia too. Now, first of all, let's just leave Leia out of this show. In The Empire Strikes Back, Obi-Wan says of Luke, "That boy is our last hope," and Yoda has to remind him that, no, there is another. And yeah, we can call that what it truly is, a bit of a continuity error. Obi-Wan was present at the birth of the twins, he knows Leia exists, he should know hope lies within her too. But right now, we can look at that scene and just assume that for so long, Obi-Wan was focused on watching over only Luke, that he believed all the hope was in him, that he kind of forgot Leia existed. And I know that's still pretty silly or stupid or whatever else you want to call it, but if during his time on Tatooine, Obi-Wan runs off on a mission to save Leia, it'll make that scene in The Empire Strikes Back even worse, because now he's going to abandon his post to run off to save Leia, someone he either forgets all about later, or just didn't think there was any hope with, despite the fact he ran off to save her. Now sure, if they were clever, and they're not, they could have it where Obi-Wan runs off to save Leia, and when he encounters her, he doesn't sense that the Force is strong with her at all. This would do multiple things. First and foremost, it explains why he thinks Luke is their last and only hope in The Empire Strikes Back, because Leia didn't end up Force sensitive, or so he thought. Second, it would explain why Darth Vader never senses the Force in Leia either, despite directly interacting with her and even interrogating her at one point. Third, it could tie into Rey and the sequel trilogy, and perhaps the Force awakens in Leia when Luke reaches out to her in The Empire Strikes Back. Problem with all that is, well, again, it would require them to be clever. Also, they've already implied in the other sources of canon, mainly in the book Leia, Princess of Alderaan, which takes place long before The Empire Strikes Back, that she is Force sensitive and has even unknowingly used the Force, that it's not laying dormant in her until The Empire Strikes Back. And speaking of all the other sources of canon, in it we've already seen Obi-Wan saving a young Luke Skywalker once before, in roughly the same time period that this show will be set in. And I really don't know that this show or series should focus on Luke all too much. In the mainline Star Wars comics from Marvel, we've gotten a couple issues about Obi-Wan and his life during this time period, and we've seen him step up and basically save Luke's life before. And honestly, I don't think we really need any more of that, nor, like I was kind of saying, do I think they should really focus on this being Obi-Wan interacting a great deal with Luke and directly saving him from something, to the point where Luke is aware of some sort of threat he was rescued from. Now sure, in A New Hope it's clear Luke and Ben Kenobi know each other to some extent, that the two have interacted a bit in the past, and I certainly wouldn't be opposed to some sort of interaction between the two in the show. It'd be cool to briefly see a young Luke Skywalker. But I don't get the impression from that movie that Obi-Wan has saved Luke's life on multiple occasions, or even once, to be honest. I don't get the impression the two had some sort of mini adventure together where Luke was in danger and Ben protected him. To me, it feels more like Luke has seen this old guy around a couple times over the years, and he thinks he's some strange old hermit that lives out in the desert, and that's about it. He's in Luke's head just enough to recognize the name Kenobi when R2 eventually shows up. Basically, and this is just my opinion, feel free to disagree with it in the comments below, but it sounded like the show was going to miss the mark if it was going to be so much about Luke and Obi-Wan that they had to scrap it all together because it was going to be too much like The Mandalorian. So in a way, I'm happy for the delay. And no, that doesn't make Kennedy a hero for scrapping it and starting over. It just means she wasted time by not recognizing what was a bad idea in the first place, even absent the similarities to The Mandalorian, which is my main problem with her. That I don't believe she truly understands what makes good Star Wars. That's not to say she doesn't have a great resume, that she doesn't have an impressive and accomplished career, only that she's not the right person for this franchise. Which of course begs the question, why did George Lucas himself put her in charge shortly before selling the company? Because if you don't know, she wasn't Disney's choice, she was instead Lucas's choice. And I can only imagine that, as I've speculated elsewhere, that since the two are friends, Lucas thought Kennedy would still listen to him, that he could call the plays from the sidelines, if you will, that his sequel trilogy would still be made, that she would fight for him and it against Disney. But, as we all know, it didn't turn out that way. Instead, she sided with Disney and, I guess, did what she thought was best for the company and for Star Wars, or what suited her own personal agenda. You decide if you want. I won't claim to know what truly motivates one Kathleen Kennedy. All I know or strongly believe is that she didn't turn out to be what George Lucas had hoped for. In closing here, I'm still very much looking forward to Kenobi. I'm not going to let this sour my excitement for the eventual series. Plus, Deborah Chow is still very much attached to the project, so at least they've got what looks to be a great director locked in and in place. And again, I'm almost glad that this version isn't going to be made, where it looks like, from my point of view, Luke may have been involved way too much or been too much of the focus. Not that Kenobi watching out for Luke shouldn't be part of the focus, or what Kenobi finds himself questioning, if he should be out there fighting the Empire himself, or if he should be putting all his faith in the child of his best friend, who betrayed him and everyone and everything else, or if he should even just give up and move on with his life and seek out something different entirely. To me, that's what should be the core of the show, Obi-Wan's inner conflict, and him finding resolve in the end. And sure, if you want to leave Tatooine or sneak some more action in there from time to time, you could always make part of the show about Darth Vader's hunt for Kenobi, and maybe he sends someone to find him, a bounty hunter or even a secret apprentice perhaps, and they do indeed end up finding him in the end and there's a big fight. I don't know, there are a lot of ways to expand the show if you feel like some guy living in the middle of the desert isn't enough excitement for a Star Wars series. And no, you don't need to have Obi-Wan running off to save Leia, or becoming best friends with Luke to do it. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think. Did the original concept for the show sound good to you, that Obi-Wan was apparently going to lend a protective hand to Luke and maybe run off to even save Leia? Or is that just a horrible idea? What would you like to see this series really be about? Whatever the case may be, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.